So yesterday night, we got some big news from Big Dana White announcing some fights for UFC 310 in Las Vegas. Now, when it comes down to these fights, there might be some controversy, some mixed opinions, and so today I'm going to break down how I feel about these fights and what I think is wrong with them, what I like about them, and just overall how good the card is now since it's been announced. But for the main event for UFC 310, Dana White announced it's going to be Belal Muhammad versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now, is this the biggest main event of all time? No, it's a Belal fight. It's not going to be big at all. And to go along with that, does Shavkat deserve a title shot? No, not really. However, there are no title challengers right now at welterweight. Shavkat is the only name that makes any sort of sense, so I don't really blame the UFC for putting Shavkat on versus Belal, because if they did Shavkat versus maybe a JDM, a Shavkat versus an Ian Gary, that means Belal has to sit out for a long amount of time. So I don't mind them jumpstarting this early and getting Shavkat an immediate title shot. Now, with this being the main event, is it going to sell pay-per-view buys? Probably not. I mean, Shavkat's a huge name, kind of, but not the biggest name. Doesn't speak great English, of course, but overall, it's going to be a pretty big fight. I think Belal's kind of come on to people nowadays since he beat Leon. Obviously, when it comes to Shavkat, there's plenty of Shavkat fans to go around, so it's going to be a huge fight. I am excited for it. Who am I going to pick? I don't know. I have mixed feelings. I'm leaning towards Shavkat right now. I think he can possibly chin Belal Muhammad, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Belal has a very, very strong chance to go out there and beat Shavkat. I think his forward pressure can do him wonders, and we haven't seen Shavkat's takedown defense really be tested so far in the UFC. But then again, when it comes to Shavkat, he has finished every single opponent he's fought in the octagon, and I think he can go out there and finish Belal. I'll do some more research on it, and I'll kind of dive deep and do a whole breakdown of this fight once it comes around during UFC 310 time. But overall, good main event. Would I want a better main event to headline this? For sure. But you know what? Belal's our champion now. He's going to have to carry some pay-per-views. Hopefully he can get a finish. Maybe he goes out there and gets his first finish against Shavkat. I'm not betting on that, but it would be absolutely crazy. But again, not betting on that. Don't see it happening. I think if Belal does win, he wins by decision, as normally. And the same can be said for Shavkat. If he does win, I think he wins by finish. But moving on to the co-main event, and this one I have a lot to say about. Pantoja versus Kai Asakura is the co-main event, and Kai Asakura is getting a title fight in his debut fight. Now, when it comes to this fight, I have mixed opinions about it. I understand why the UFC did it. I know why Kai Asakura is getting a title fight. However, should that really be the case? Now, I think this is more on how bad flyweight is right now. Is flyweight done entirely? No, but I think the division right now is in a really, really bad spot. I think the UFC's plan with Kai Sakura was probably to get him a title shot, and then hopefully Tatsuro Taira was going to beat Royval, and they probably do a pay-per-view or fight night in Japan or something like that. However, Taira lost. Those plans fell through. Now it's just Kai Asakura versus Pantoja. Now, this fight announcement does feel kind of rushed because I think the UFC kind of knew that if Royval won, he kind of has the biggest claim to a title shot, and he just recently lost to Pantoja. So for the UFC trying to put on Pantoja versus Royval, I believe 3, it wouldn't really bring too much hype to the fight. We've already seen it 3 times. Pantoja already won both times pretty convincingly. So the UFC had to find a way out and kind of announce a fight as quick as possible because they don't want Royval getting an immediate title shot after beating Taira. So the best thing for them to do is to bring in a new hot commodity and Kai Asakura, a guy from Ryzen, who is big in Japan, by the way. Like I know in the US, we mainly just watch UFC. Ryzen's kind of put on the back burner. Ryzen's for more of the hardcore fans who like to watch that consistently, the MMA junkies type deal. So the majority of people don't really know who Kai Asakura is, but trust me, Kai Asakura is a really big deal in Japan. He is a huge name. His YouTube gets very, very good views. He's really, really a big name in Japan. This guy can sell out arenas for Ryzen. And we know with the UFC, they want to get into that Eastern market. They want to get into the Asian countries. They want to take something from one championship, right? And getting some more Japanese big names into their promotion, getting more of these guys from those Asian countries who are big names that are already established into their promotion can help them break into that Asian market. So again, do I really agree with Kai Sakura getting a title shot in his debut? No, but I understand why the UFC is doing it. I would have preferred for Kai to get maybe a couple fights in the UFC, maybe 1 or 2 fights before a title shot. That would have been ideal for me, but it is what it is. I understand why they're doing it. Now, when it comes to the actual fight, I don't find Kai Asakura to be too amazing. I watched a few of his fights, his most recent ones. He has finishing potential, but he gets hit quite a lot. There's not much head movement on Kai Asakura. He can eat a lot of jabs. He's tough. He's a good chin for the most part, but he can be finished as well. His grappling defense is, I would say, pretty good. Not the best I've ever seen, but it's pretty above average, I would say. I think Pantoja will have a hard time getting him down, but I think on the feet, man, Pantoja can just walk him down and land shots on him. It's going to be, I think, pretty easy money for him to land shots. Now, can Pantoja avoid getting finished? I think he can. He's a tough guy. We've seen him go through several hard fights in the UFC. I think he'll be all right versus Kai Asakura. So if I had to pick a fight right now, pick the winner of that fight, I would probably pick Pantoja just off first glance. I'll do some more research on Kai Asakura, but just from what I saw in his most recent fights and what I've seen in the past, he does get hit quite often, and it's really worrying when you're fighting a guy like Pantoja, who is not scared to just walk you down and trade in the pocket quite consistently. Now, moving on from that, I want to address this Vicente Luque versus Nick Diaz fight. This fight is absolutely abysmal. This fight shouldn't be happening whatsoever. It's already gotten rebooked to this date. It's stupid to me why they're letting Nick Diaz fight Vicente Luque. And I know Luque has looked pretty rough in his last few fights, but he's still a power puncher. He's still a monster. We watched Nick Diaz pretty much just accept defeat against Robbie Lawler in his last fight. He's older, he's washed, he's not the same Nick Diaz. I know his name, Nick Diaz, carries a ton of weight. And when you hear his name, you think about how tough he is. But at this point in his UFC career, his lifespan at this point, it's just pretty much done for Nick Diaz. Like, I think Nick Diaz deserves probably a better matchup for himself, man, not a Luque. Like, Diaz versus Ferguson is right there on the table for you. You don't need to book him versus Luque. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Give Diaz a matchup that makes sense. Why would you give him Luque? A guy who KOs people, a guy who hits hard. I mean, I know Luque is not the same anymore, but he's not like that far off of what he used to be. It's not like Luque is old, done, over the hill, aging, has no power anymore, his chin is completely gone. No, Luque can still throw banging shots, man. I don't understand. And Nick Diaz is just way past his prime. He's at the end of his career. I think he's broke and fighting for money at this point, if I'm being honest with you. I don't think Nick Diaz is coming back to the UFC because he wants to. I think he needs some extra moolah in his pocket. And giving him Luque, I think, is the most disrespectful thing you could do to Nick Diaz right now. Give him a legend matchup. Give him Tony Ferguson. Give him somebody else besides Vicente Luque. I don't know. If you couldn't tell by now, I'm picking Luque to win that fight, probably by KO, TKO, whatever. I think we'll see Nick Diaz do what he did against Robbie Lawler and just can't take anymore, you know? That fight really pisses me off, but it is what it is, man. Moving on to the final fight that Dana White announced. It's going to be Cyril Gane versus Alexandre Volkov 2. Good fight. Glad to see Cyril Gane back. He's been out for too long, being in France, doing his movies and shit. And so for Volkov, I'm glad to see him back. He's staying active. But for Cyril Gane, this is not the same Volkov that you first fought. This Volkov, I think, has improved rapidly, and I think he's improved a lot with the striking. So for Cyril Gane, who's taken a lot of time off, who's been doing other things, not focused on MMA, fighting this Volkov might be a really tough challenge for him. Now, I'm probably still going to take Cyril Gane. I think if you don't grapple with him, it's going to be a very tough time for you. But Volkov can go out there and probably find ways to outstrike Cyril Gane for 3 rounds. I'm sorry. I wouldn't really doubt that. Let's not forget that Cyril Gane got dropped by Tai Tuivasa. Volkov is, I think, night and day better than Tai Tuivasa, and he proved that when they fought. I think Volkov's a real monster now, a real menace, and I'm not going to count him out, and I'm going to go back and just watch a few more Volkov fights. This is my first reaction, by the way, and just get a better understanding of how much he's improved over the last few fights, but I do know he has improved, and him fighting Cyril Gane, man, it's going to be a more tough matchup for Cyril Gane than what it was when he first fought him. So, but as of right now, I still am leaning towards Cyril Gane just because he won the first matchup and how the styles clash, but Volkov, I might switch my pick eventually. I don't know. We'll see what happens in the future. Once we get to fight week, you might see Kindle MMA switch his pick to Volkov. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. That was the whole news. Probably a quick video for you guys today. But if you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, bell icon for notifications. But I'll see y'all later.